Welcome to another Rattles Weekly Wraps. I'm Viv Governor, and as usual, our format is going to be a little macro segment at the start and a tech segment at the end. The macro segment this week will be a bit larger due to the South African elections, which I want to cover in more detail. Also, we'll cover the latest economic numbers out of the US. In the tech segment, we're just going to look at some of the recent developments with regards to OpenAI, as well as the most recent raising by Elon Musk of funds for his XAI, as well as the Tesla situation at the moment. So let's start off with the latest economic numbers of the US. We had PCE, personal consumption expenditure, come in at about 3.6 versus the expected 3.7. We also saw a slight weakening of the US overall economy. These factors would indicate a greater chance of a rate cut going forward than it was in the past. However, 3.6 is still significantly above the 2% target of the US Fed. And the fact that we are seeing inflation remain that sticky is going to make it really difficult for the Fed to cut. I think the Fed's going to have difficulty cutting if we don't see inflation at least below 3%. Because if you have a target of 2, your inflation numbers beyond 3, and then you want to cut interest rates, that just doesn't work together. Then, in regards to the GDP numbers that have been coming out, we've been seeing some weakness in the US economy, and we've seen that for a while. Unfortunately, yes, that is a necessary condition to look at interest rate cuts, but it's not a sufficient condition. That means it's not enough just to have weaker economic growth. And in fact, if you have weak economic growth and the inflation number stays high, you will keep interest rates high. Maybe you don't have to raise them if inflation starts rising, irrespective of what that means for economic growth, because that was the kind of like the hardcore commitment that you've made as a central bank when you go for inflation targeting like the US government has. So slightly weaker economic numbers, slightly weaker inflation numbers should be reasonably good for rate cuts, but I don't think it's yet enough to change the forecasts of maybe one cut this year at the moment. Then moving on to the election. This is the big story of this week in South Africa, and therefore the thing we're going to focus on most here. Now, what I want you to understand is that this is a watershed election. At the moment, it looks like, as I speak to you, the ANC is going to get not just below 50, but below 45%. We've seen a huge rise in a couple of parties. Firstly, the PA, the Patriotic Alliance, Gaten McKenzie, the former prisoner that started this party, is getting probably in the region of 2% to maybe 3%. Right now, it's sitting at about 4%, but assumptions in terms of like forecasts and so on, putting it above 2%. The MK party is looking to be, this is Jacob Zuma's party, is looking to be number 3 in the country, above the EFF. So it's looking like the ANC is sitting at about 42 to 43%. The DA is just under 25%. MK in the low to mid-teens. The EFF around about 10, maybe slightly lower than that. Then comes the PA, the Patriotic Alliance. So Gaten McKenzie comes in at number 5. Okay. This is a really big shakeup. We're talking about two parties here that were not existing, in any real way of like a little while ago, and now they are in the top 5 parties in the country. The interesting thing about this is where their votes coming from. The Patriotic Alliance apparently is doing really well in the Western Cape. The MK, of course, as we know, is doing really well in KZN. According to initial estimates, they seem to be eating into the ANC's numbers in both those provinces. And if you look at basically what the ANC is going to be ending up with, like I said, the low to 40s, it's going to need either the MK, the EFF, or possibly the DA to partner up with it to get above 50%. If it goes for the smaller parties, it's going to probably have to include the PA. The IFP not doing that well. It might even end up being below the PA when all is said and done. Because it looks like Jacob Zuma's MK has really eaten into the IFP as well as the ANC in KZN. Without the EFF or without MK, without the DA, it's going to be very difficult for the ANC to get together a coalition that's going to be stable going forward. Now, why is this important? Well, over the last 30 years or so, we've had some fluctuations in the country. Make no doubt about that. I mean, we've weakened by about 6+% a year for the last 30 years. But that's kind of like just about inflation differential between South Africa and, say, the US, about 6% or so. And so we haven't really gotten out of whack with what the world is looking at South Africa as. And that stability, like I said, 6.5% average or 6% average weakening versus the dollar over the last 3 decades. That has been driven by, I think, something that we underestimate important. That is the stability of the South African political system. We've had the ANC in charge. They've been seen to be grown-ups. Maybe they're corrupt. Maybe there's issues around implementation, but they've seen to be grown-ups. They're not putting incredibly radical policies in place. They aren't totally revamping the South African system. They aren't going out and doing things that are really going to scare the market. And so the market's been reasonably comfortable, slowly depreciating the currency at like inflation, which plus a little bit, but not that much. And that has been the general pattern for the last 30 years. If, however, we're entering a period where the ANC is not the majority party by a long shot and is now working in a coalition, suddenly it's a very different fundamental economic and political situation in the country. We could easily have a situation in which they are held ransom by an EFF or an MK, whoever their partner is going to be in the coalition government that they're going to have to put together. And it's going to be an ANC-led coalition government, make no doubt about that. The DA is not going to be able to go out there and basically wrangle up together 50-something% of the votes of the seats to basically make a party. They would need like 25+% of the votes. I mean, to put the MK plus EFF plus PA plus maybe a couple other parties together required to make this particular coalition work. And these are pretty different parties, very different philosophies from the DA. It's much easier for the ANC to basically either team up with the MK or with the EFF, and we get a couple other smaller coalition partners together to get a 55+% coalition together that kind of protects them against any small defection by 1 or 2 small members, and even to a certain extent buffers them against the defection by the big member partner, with the EFF or the MK, whatever it may be. So it's going to be an ANC-led government going forward, but a much more vulnerable ANC-led government with partners in play that are going to be much more radical in many ways than what the ANC is. The EFF, we all know about the land policy. The PA, Patriotic Alliance, has a very, very strong anti-immigrant, anti-migrant policy, which is, quite troublesome. Especially this kind of is the reason that it's done so well. The MK, we don't quite know what the philosophy is, but Jacob Zuma has, historically been willing to go quite, radical in terms of some of his, policies to basically bolster support in certain areas. So we're going to have a ANC-led coalition that's probably going to be more radical, more likely to make, unusual moves than the ANC alone was. We also like to see a change at the top of the ANC. I doubt Cyril Ramaphosa is going to be able to maintain his position because of the fact that, he's the guy that was in charge when the ANC lost his majority. That usually means that you're out. The example I'd put here is, like in India, Modi and BJP, they have internal issues. They have internal issues with regards to, instability, corruption, even accusations of, ethnic cleansing. But, the economy is growing really well. And if Modi wins again with the BJP, we would likely see, an uptick in that market. Why? Because from a faraway view, it's stability. It's the same policies, the same patterns that have been, we've expected for a long time going forward. If, for instance, a coalition of the India alliance, which is, the weird kind of alliance they have in that political system, comes into power, I think the market will probably react negatively to that because it's going to be a much more drastic change in terms of what's been the pattern the last say decade or so. And it's going to mean that, you have to reevaluate your assumptions about that economy. And the market doesn't like to reevaluate things. The market doesn't like this kind of uncertainty. And therefore, they'll be reacting quite negatively. And the same thing here. You can make all your complaints about the ANC and all that they've done and all the issues that they've had. But they provided stability. Stability, the market knows what to expect. An EFF ANC coalition, we don't know what the market, what to expect in the next couple of years. Could we be seeing more, expropriation? Could we be seeing some of the policies the EFF has around banking, etc., coming into play? That could be very disruptive. The MK, it's almost like a black box. We don't know what's inside that thing. The PA, what happens is if South Africa turns into a more xenophobic country than it is right now, and on the official level, what impact does it have on the currency and the economy and the growth rate and so on? These are all unknowns that the market does not want to be dealing with. So right now, I suggest that if you're looking at the currency, maybe and looking to take some money out of the country, obviously I'm not giving you like exact advice for whatever you're doing, but I would pay closer attention to the currency moves than we are than you've been in the past. I think that some of the levels that we had historically, like 20% for the 20 rounds to the dollar, which is held a number of times over the last couple of years, those things can easily be broken in such a volatile period as we are entering at the moment. Okay, and now moving on to our little tech segment. So AI, we talked about OpenAI's bad time, and people are now looking at Sam Altman as a possible liability for that company. And like I mentioned in the last episode, the PR issue with regards to Scarlett Johansson is plus the more fundamental and more important issue with regards to some of the stuff that Altman has been accused of with regards to contracts with employees where they would lose their vested shares should they say disparaging things about the company or what Altman, whoever knows exactly that's phrased. Those things have really damaged OpenAI's kind of like reputation in the last couple of weeks or so. And some have come out and said that if we had that same firing of Altman that we saw basically a couple of months ago happen again right now, there would not be anywhere near as much support for him as there was. And what I want to bring into is a new little kind of segment that came out where one of the former board members of OpenAI came out and discussed why exactly they fired Altman. And it turns out that he has behaved in maybe not a totally illegal manner, but like a pretty scummy kind of manner. Some of the things that the board member claimed was, for instance, when GPT-4 was released, or ChatGPT was released, it was GPT-5 was released, they did not know about it as a board. It was released without the board being informed of it. Now, the board is made of like 6 members. 3 of them are not involved in the company, and 3 were involved in the company. Sam Altman, Greg Brock, and Ilya Sutskever. Okay, the 3 people that are involved in the company obviously knew that they would release this thing. The other 3 board members did not know about the release of ChatGPT, and I think that is one kind of thing that's troubling. The next thing is apparently Altman has tried to, in the past, push for, people that he doesn't like to be pushed out of the company. He's used, quite bullying tactics, let me say, with regards to, the way he runs the company. There's even been rumors that, in his previous kind of position before Y Combinator, he was kicked out or pushed out of the company because of issues around ethics and whatnot. There's even been an emergence of a story regarding his sister, which is more salacious than I want to talk about. But historically was like, just palmed off as being, just total fabrication on her part. And I think still is palmed off as being total fabrication on her part. But, obviously with all these other things coming into play, even if the accusation is not believable or credible, it does impact, people's perception about you. So right now, like I said, OpenAI under a great deal of pressure with regard to its public perception. And this is quite a big change now because for the last, I would say, year or so, pretty much more than a year or so, since the release of GPT especially, we've seen a lot of positive news around Altman, around OpenAI and so on, and that I think is diminished. The next thing I want to talk about is Tesla and Elon Musk, and the most recent thing in the whole Muskosphere. Maybe like I make that a term that is used, the Muskosphere. Anyway, so we have had the vote for Tesla, and that's probably going to come out next week or so with regard to the results. That vote would basically kind of effectively reinstate Tesla's deal with Elon Musk. We've seen a number of large, institutions and private investors come out against voting yes. Even though they voted yes the first time around, they were saying they don't want to vote yes again. To a large extent, he's kind of burnt some bridges, but also there's an argument to be made that now he's not paying as much attention to Tesla as he was in the past, especially since he's launching yet another new company, XAI, which is going to be his AI venture. He's raised $6 billion for this thing. This is the biggest raise by any company of this kind of nature. There's a startup company in history, like 2 times plus larger than the second biggest one in history. This gives it a valuation of about $24 billion, the $6 billion raise. And apparently people are mentioning the fact that people that invested in Twitter/X as it is now were given preferential access to this particular investment. Now, Musk has had a huge history in AI. One of the first investors in DeepMind, one effectively of the founders of OpenAI. So there's no doubt that he has kind of the skill set, the history to possibly make this into a real company. And to give an idea of what this company could be worth, OpenAI is valued somewhere between $80 and $100 billion by a lot of estimates. I don't think there's any reason that this could not be a similar size company, especially if you're starting off with a valuation of 24 billion as it is right now. It's going to be able to play with the big boys in terms of spending, in terms of pushing things through. And I think that that's something that we can reasonably expect him to make a good go of. Now, if you're a Tesla shareholder, we're looking at OpenAI, XAI out there. Must pay more attention to that. We're looking at what he's doing on Twitter/X. You're looking at what's happening on SpaceX, and you think to yourself, is it worth paying this guy $50 billion to be CEO of Tesla, when we don't really know if he's going to pay that much attention to us? Especially since we've already gotten a lot of the benefits of Musk in the first place. When Musk made the deal back, like 5 years ago or so, the company was worth 10 times less than it is right now. So he's added the 10 times value. And in fact, the judge says, hey, the 10 times value is added. You don't need to pay for that. So let's imagine somebody comes and builds something for you, and you made an agreement with them to build it, then the judge comes and says, no, you don't actually owe them the money for this thing. Maybe scummy of you not to pay him the money, but you don't have to. And that could be some of the deal made going forward. Now, the problem is that if they do this, Musk could easily say, okay, I sell my shares in Tesla. He has about 12-13% of the shares in Tesla. Take those profits, pump them into X, pump them into Twitter, pay off his Twitter debt, whatever you want to do. Focus on SpaceX and maybe carry on from there. And we don't know for certain if this company can continue on the path it is on right now without Musk, helping out. For whatever reason, some people say he's lucky, but I don't think you can be that lucky. Musk has been involved in 2 times as many billion-dollar companies as anybody else in history, right? The next number 2 is got like only half as many billion-dollar companies, and the companies he's created: Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, PayPal. He's been foundational. Even he wasn't being the original founder, he was foundational in creating these companies, or at least the final version of these companies. And these things basically, or these skills, whatever they may be, are obviously time tested and proven. And without them, who knows exactly what might happen to Tesla going forward? Especially considering even at the current valuation, Tesla is still massively more valuable than this couple of car makers in the world combined. We will know in a couple of weeks' time whether or not this deal goes through. We will know what Musk's, obviously response that's going to be going forward. And before I leave you, one last thing. By the time this comes out, you probably will have an answer regarding Donald Trump's trial. We'll speak about that more next week. But I think this is going to be an election unlike any other in the US. And I do think that irrespective of the guilty or innocent verdict from this trial, the impact on perceptions about the US justice system is going to be quite dramatic, especially ahead of the election. And I think next week we'll discuss, just quite in advance, what's happening with the US political system at the moment. And one final thing before I leave you guys, we're having a seminar next week, Wednesday, on the 5th of June on AI. It's a quarterly seminar. Please join me. There's a couple of things I want to talk about in that seminar. We obviously have more time, and I think more outline our thesis of what's happening, as well as go through a couple of changes we've made since the last seminar. Some things we've sold out of and some things we've bought in the portfolio. I think it will be quite interesting. So if you want to join that seminar, go to our website and there'll be a link there to basically book your place. Okay. Cheers. Thanks for joining me.